In today's video, we're going to be installing these 4:2:1 headers. I picked this up on Craigslist for pretty cheap. As far as I read, these are pretty decent and should be an easy install. These are going to be going on my 1999 Miata. This is one modification that I have always wanted to do to one of my Miatas, one of the 8 or so that I've had over the years, and I just have never gotten around to do it. I'm pretty sure there is no power advantage. I think it might just be a slight sound advantage, if anything. But unlike the NAs, the NBs have a cat in the header, or at least I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong, I don't know. One of you guys is gonna correct me either way. I'm pretty sure there's a cat in the header. You can tell that these cast headers on the NBs are way more restrictive. I'm not sure that this is even gonna be considered a power mod. I more would just consider this a sound slash aesthetic mod. I really just wanted to get a header for this thing. It's pretty ugly right now. At some point when we do dress up the engine bay a little bit, we will get that Cerakoted or whatever. We'll coat it in something to make it look better than it is now. Right now it's good enough, and we're just gonna go ahead and throw it in. We have a completely factory exhaust from the headers all the way to the exhaust right now, so I highly doubt there's going to be much of a difference at all. I could be wrong. I doubt that most people do a header before they do an exhaust, but we're going to do it this way just because this is what I picked up first. We will be getting at least an axle back for this thing as well, but we're going to have to wait for that later down the line because I may or may not have gotten some 18s for this thing, so we're making some moves. It's just I don't want to do everything super fast and drop a ton of money on this thing all at one time. I want to do it a little bit at a time. So we're starting to get this thing rolling a little bit, and we should be doing some cool stuff pretty soon here. If you aren't familiar, this is my other Miata, and this thing is on 18s as well. We're not going with quite as aggressive specs, but these are 18s, and you can tell that they are pretty damn big and take quite a lot of modification to fit them. So I'm pretty excited for those to come in. It's gonna be a few weeks before we ever see those though. Anyways, we're gonna go ahead and start ripping out the old header. We're pretty much just gonna start disassembling all of this stuff here, pull it apart, put it on jack stands, that way we have access to the underside. And I've heard that this is a pretty easy install, but I've never done it before. Few hours later, we finally got this stupid thing out. Obviously, the easiest way to do this is just undo as much stuff as you can. I could not get all of these bolts here. I couldn't get to this one, and then this one's a different size. I also ended up having to cut off the piping for the EGR valve that goes from the header to the manifold, basically just because I had to take that thing out as one piece, and it was just absolutely impossible to snake it through. I was having so much trouble. We also ended up dropping the steering rack to be able to get this out of the way. Oh my gosh, did I bang so much stuff up. This was a huge pain in the ass. If I was able to get these two apart, I would have been able to do this super quickly and the proper way, but it was nearly impossible to get to this one after I had already loosened everything up, and then trying to get to this other one was just absolutely impossible. And I'm honestly surprised this one even came off. Last time I did this, these all broke or were like spinning or something. They were just all trash. So basically, I knew that this was going to be a huge pain. I really thought that I was going to be able to snake all this thing out, but everything was fighting me the entire way. We also had to take off the one bolt from the bell housing. Technically, there's supposed to be two for the bracket that holds that exhaust on. It was just so many little things that were just fighting me along the way. Nothing about this was easy. Now, I did test fit our new header in place, and it fits in there nice and easy, and it's not a problem at all. The only thing is that now with the EGR thing being cut apart, we're gonna have to do a little bit of modifications to them. What I'm gonna do is I'm basically going to weld up the pieces to make plugs for the EGR metal piece. What I did is I ground this piece. This is going to go into the manifold, and then we're going to weld this up. I got to take a file and grind that up a little bit more. And then this is the side that goes onto the intake manifold, and we're going to weld that up and basically make our own plugs. I know that you can get the plugs online, but I really don't have time for that right now. I'm just going to quickly weld this stuff up, and hopefully just block it off and throw it together, and it really should work. There were some people saying online with a factory ECU that might cause some issues or something. The issues that they said it might cause is just stuff that doesn't really matter all that much. No one really seemed to have any major issues with it, so I'm basically just doing this out of convenience, and then later down the line maybe we'll completely delete the EGR valve, or we'll do whatever else with the vacuum lines or something. I'm not entirely sure yet. I'm only going to address it if it causes enough issues, but I'll update you guys if it is an issue later down the line. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and weld up the plugs for those things. We'll be able to throw those things on. Then we'll be able to take the manifold, snake it in there, bolt everything up. Hopefully it'll go nice and smooth. Really, the only pain in the ass thing to do after this is put the rack back up into place. One more thing, I said that there was a cat in the manifold. For some reason, this is different than my other one. I'm not sure if maybe they had like a mid-year change or something, but there is no cat in this manifold, so I don't think we're going to be getting a whole lot of power gains or anything out of this, unless the manifold is restrictive, which I honestly don't think so. It's more just going to be aesthetics. But I believe in my other 99 Miata with the header, it was like a two-piece header, so I'm pretty sure that there's normally a cat right here. I'm sure you guys can let me know if this is maybe just a earlier model or maybe a later model or something than the other one that I had. I really couldn't tell you. Basically, until we get rid of the mid-pipe that has the cat and then I think a resonator, I don't think we're going to be getting a whole lot more airflow through the exhaust system. I got both of these pieces ground down, welded up, and then ground down the welds a little bit. So this is the plug that goes into the exhaust manifold, and then this is the plug that goes into the intake manifold. Pretty much I'm going to just seal it from the backside with like high temp sealant, and then this one just screws right in, and we're gonna hope that they hold air. They probably should. Few hours and lots of yelling later, I got this thing all put together. One thing you should know about doing a header install, it is not fun or easy. I'm sure if you know what you're doing, it's pretty easy. Everything was pretty straightforward. It was just not fun at all. And with the exhaust system being all rusted out because this is a Indiana car, it was really not fun at all. Again, if you can pull that header apart from the that other section, it'll make your life so much easier. If you can undo that valve that goes around the backside of the motor, so much easier. I couldn't do either of those, so I just had to start cutting stuff, and we had to do a little bit of modifications. I had a few of you guys let me know that this would be a pretty easy install. As far as everything lining up with the aftermarket header, everything was perfectly fine. This header went in super easy. It was really just getting the OEM stuff out that was the problem. So everything's put back together. I broke quite a few things trying to get the old one out. I ended up breaking this piece here, which is whatever the cam position sensor, just because I was trying to fumble everything around. Good thing I had a replacement of that. The valve thing that goes around the back for the exhaust, we ended up welding up some plugs and putting those back on. I'm not sure if it's going to affect anything. I'll let you know later down the line if it does. As of right now, it runs fine. I did start it up, nothing leaks. We did have a leak between the aftermarket header and the factory mid-pipe. I ended up kind of just putting two gaskets together with some sealant and stuff, and not like a gasket sealant that's gonna like harden it and like seal to either one of the other two. It's kind of more of like, I don't know what it is. Basically, I'm not like JB welding it together is what I'm trying to say. The couple of things, the steering shaft just drop the rack. It'll make your life so much easier. I dropped the rack, I put it back on, I put it back on the wrong way. I didn't realize that there was the notch in the shaft for the bolt to go through on the clamp, if you know what I'm talking about. Anyways, if you end up doing this, you will know what I'm talking about. Having dropped the subframe a couple of times, I never noticed it. I must have just put it back in the right position. What else? I think that's all that was giving us trouble for the main part. Everything's put together, nothing's leaking. I did end up breaking the O2 sensor just to be able to get this thing out easier. I broke it on purpose actually, but that's because I had a replacement one. I replaced it with the one that I had. The plugs were different, so I did have to wire it in. I think I wired it correctly. It seems to run and drive. Well, it seems to run. I haven't driven it yet. So I've only ever started this thing briefly. For now, we're going to turn this thing on, let it warm up, give it some res, and see if we notice any difference. As for now, we only have the aftermarket header and then full factory exhaust behind that. Like I said earlier in the video, I thought that this header had a cat in it for some reason. This one doesn't, it's just a cast manifold, whereas the other 99 MIATA that I had a cat in it, and I know this and I remember this because it was clogged like really bad, and it was like, I was wondering why it was lacking power, and that was why whenever we swapped the engine, we took the thing apart and we realized how clogged it was. So I don't know why this one doesn't have it. I really don't know, doesn't matter. Anyways, I highly doubt that this is gonna get us any sort of power gains or any sort of sound gains. It's probably just more of an aesthetic thing as of right now, until we get a more complete exhaust system. Anyways, we're gonna start this thing up, let it warm up a little bit, and then give it the same revs that we did before, and I'll match it up and we'll see if it sounds any different. I highly doubt it will though. So I got a little bit of time driving with this thing with the new headers and the completely stock exhaust. So far, I have noticed a few things. It is quite noticeable that there is something different in the exhaust system. I think it sounds a little bit better, maybe. I don't think it's much louder just because the full exhaust, obviously. I just think that it maybe has a little bit of a different tone, if anything. Other than that, probably very little having to do with how loud it actually is. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. Install could have been way smoother. I had so many difficulties doing this thing. I tried doing it correctly, but it just was not helping me, having all of these pieces just absolutely rusted together, and it was just a huge pain in the ass. So much worse than it had to be. If you guys have a cleaner car, or maybe just take a little bit more time, you know, putting some PB blasters, some WD-40 on those bolts so you can get them loose, I'm sure it'll be a lot easier, and you can do it 100% correct with still keeping in that valve. Anyways, I haven't noticed any problems. I checked the OD2. The only problem we did have was the O2 sensor. I think I might have wired it in wrong because it was a different plug, so it might have been for a different year or something. So I might have done, there was 2 black wires, and it was a 50-50 chance if I wired them in wrong or right, and it was throwing a code for it. Maybe it's just because of the header. Either way, I got a new O2 sensor. Not a big deal, except for the O2 sensor cost nearly as much as what I got the headers for, which is kind of crazy. But anyways, this is where we're gonna end today's video. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.